Okay, in this video we're going to talk about the religion that is found in the Homeric poems, and that it is almost certainly reflective of the religious beliefs and practices of the early Iron Age II period, and really is the foundation for the religious practices of ancient Greece in general. So I want to start by talking about the gods and goddesses of the Greeks. Now, we could be here all day because the Greeks believed in very, very many gods and goddesses, but we're going to focus right now on the major ones. So the main core of the Greek pantheon, which is the group of gods and goddesses they all worship, are the 12 Olympian gods and goddesses. And so this is a group of 12 major deities that the ancient Greeks worshipped. And they get their name because supposedly they lived on Mount Olympus in northern Greece. That's where all their palaces were. Now, some gods will be more popular in certain regions of Greece, some will be less popular, but these are the 12 gods that pretty much everyone in the Greek world recognizes and worships to some degree. So, these include, and I should say they're all kind of envisioned as a big family. Everyone's related. Pretty much everyone's related to Zeus. Zeus is the head god, right? We'll call him the king of the gods. And he is also a god of weather. He's associated with storms, with lightning. He's often seen holding a lightning bolt, which he uses as his weapon. He's associated with the eagle, which is supposed to be his messenger when he sends messages to people or other gods and goddesses. And so, yeah, he is the high god of the Greek pantheon. His wife is Hera, and she is the goddess of women, children, families. Right? She is their protector and patron. And despite this, Zeus, we will find, cheats on his wife Hera a lot. He has a lot of children, thanks to many, many affairs that he conducts. Now, Poseidon is a brother of Zeus. These are all actually brothers and sisters on this side. He's one of Zeus's brothers. And he is the god of the seas. Right? For the Greeks, the sea is a very important aspect of their life because it's so sort of omnipresent in the Greek world, and so he's a fairly important god as well. He's often wielding a trident, right, which is like a spear like that. Demeter, a sister of Zeus and the rest, she is a goddess of agriculture. Right? She is sort of the patron of farming and agricultural fertility. So she is often more worshipped in the countryside than in the cities themselves. And then you have Hestia, who is kind of a nothing of a goddess. I mean, she is the protectress of the hearth and home, right? The hearth being the main fire that heats the home and you cook over it. So she's more often worshipped in the home rather than out like in the village or the city. And she also just doesn't show up in any myths and legends. She doesn't do anything because she never leaves her house. That's the basic idea. This is a set of brothers and sisters, even though like Zeus and Hera are married and Zeus and Demeter have a child together as well. The Greeks didn't care about that stuff. Gods and goddesses could sleep with pretty much any relative and it was fine. And then the rest of the Olympian gods are the children of Zeus by various people. So first you have Athena, who is his daughter by his first wife, Metis. Athena is the goddess of things like wisdom, warfare, certain crafts. Weaving is a big one for her. She is associated with the owl, right, is the bird that she's often associated with. The olive tree you also often see associated with her. Ares and Hephaestus are Zeus's children by his wife Hera. So Ares is a god of war. And you might think, well, Athena's already a god of war. Why is there a second one? There's a real distinction in the aspects of warfare that they represent. Athena is very much sort of the tactics and strategy of warfare. Ares is very much the cruelty and bloodlust. And so you'll find that Ares is a very negative god, and people don't really worship him. You don't find temples to Ares very often. People don't like him. Hephaestus, though, is a god of crafting. He is kind of a god of, especially smiths, people who work with metals. So he's obviously popular with a lot of the crafters in the Greek world. Next up, we have Apollo and Artemis, who are twins, a brother and a sister, and they're the children of Zeus by his aunt, right, who he slept with one time. Apollo has a lot going on for him. He kind of gets a lot of things that he's associated with. Often people associate him immediately with the sun. He is associated with the sun, but in the ancient Greek world, that's not really his primary association. For the Greeks, music is big for Apollo, right? He's very much a god of music. Medicine's another big one. And prophecy, right? Telling the future. He's got all of those. Artemis is his twin sister. She is a goddess of the wilderness and animals. Right? The wild parts of the world. So if Demeter's sort of the fields of the farms, then Artemis is the wild parts, the mountains and the forests and things like that. Then you have Aphrodite, who in some versions is the daughter of Zeus by a goddess named Dione. Sometimes she's not, though. Just depends on the version. And so she is a goddess of love, beauty, sex, things like that. And finally you have Hermes, who is Zeus's son by Maya. And he is, again, he has a number of associations. He is a messenger god. So he is also, because he's a messenger god, he is a god of travelers and merchants who often have to travel. Thieves, who also often travel. He is also what's called the psychopomp. He leads the souls of the dead down to the underworld once they're dead. So these are the main 12 gods and goddesses of the ancient Greek world. And you've probably heard many stories about them, which we don't have the time to get into. You probably have heard of many other gods and goddesses like Hades and Persephone and Dionysus, but here we have the main 12. So, what is Greek religion like then? How is it expressed? So the Greeks have this concept of being in a relationship with the gods, and we today call it the charis relationship. It is this idea of reciprocal exchange of favors. It's actually not far off from like gift exchange between chiefdoms that the idea of xenia rules over. But it's this idea that you as a person give favors to the gods, and then they owe you a favor in return. And once the gods have done something for you, you owe them a favor in return. So you're in this constant relationship with the gods where you are giving them favors in order to obligate them to give you favors, which obligates you to give them favors. So this is what this charis relationship is. And so what is a favor for a god? It can be a couple things. It can be a gift, which is also known as a votive offering. This can be of various size and expense. It could be a little bit of food, a flower garland. It could be some incense, wine. It could be a statue. It could be a little figurine. It could be a giant statue. It could be an entire temple. There's a lot of possibilities here, just depending on what you have to spend. Animal sacrifice is big. Gods in ancient Greece love animal sacrifice. All right. So different animals are used. Different gods and goddesses prefer different animals. So some like pigs, some like sheep, some like goats, some like black sheep, white sheep, right? There's different, again, each one has their own sort of preferences that you should abide by. Music, dance, poetry, these kinds of performances supposedly please the gods, so you find them as another aspect of worship. So things like this are what you give gods and goddesses, and you communicate your desires to the gods and goddesses then through prayer. Right? Prayer is your channel of communication. So you offer something to them, and then you pray to them and say, this is what I want in return. And of course, the gods, in theory, can give you lots of things. Your crops can prosper, you can have healthy children, safe voyages, whatever you can imagine. Many religions have moral codes, right? Codes of ethics that you have to abide by. The Greek religion does not really have that. I would say there's no set moral code. There are a couple things the gods do seem to condemn. And this includes breaking xenia. So if a person is a guest in your household and you mistreat them, that's breaking xenia. Or if you are a guest in someone's household and you mistreat them, you've broken xenia. So this relationship of mutual hospitality that we see in society in the early Iron Age is very sacred almost. And so supposedly Zeus himself will punish people who break xenia. Oath breaking is another thing. If you make an oath and you break it, the gods can punish you for that. Another thing I would say is arrogance. Thinking that you're better than other people, thinking you're like a god. right? That you deserve the same kind of honor and worship that a god has, that you have done great things that make you like a god. That kind of arrogance is also frequently punished. But other things like just lying, murder, rape, those are not universally punished, right? So yeah, there's no real rigid moral code there. Afterlife, right? Most religions have some kind of set belief in the afterlife. The Greeks do believe in an afterlife, but the specifics of that are unclear. We see in the Odyssey that Odysseus does visit the underworld, and he sees a spot that is set aside for the very bad, the people who have done this kind of stuff. And there but everyone else is just sort of like a shambling ghost with no sense of what's going on around them. So there's not a really positive view of the afterlife. You're not rewarded for your behavior, certainly. But it's not clear that what we see in the Odyssey is really what everyone believed and ascribed to, right? So it's pretty unclear what they thought the afterlife would be like. In terms of just like organization, so in a village, you will find priests and priestesses. And they are assigned to specific gods and goddesses. So you might be a priest of Zeus or a priestess of Athena in general. You have priestesses for goddesses and priests for gods. And this is a hereditary position. It's passed down within a family. It's not a full-time position. This is not, like, you don't have to devote your life to this. You don't have to have any special education or training. You don't have to live by any special moral code the way that, like, a priest might in other cultures. This is just something you do when there's a rite or a festival that needs to be celebrated. And so your job here is, when it's necessary, to carry out rites on behalf of the village. So if the village needs to ask the god for something, you will do it. So let's say you have had a bad crop this year. Maybe you need to pray to Demeter. Maybe you need rain. Maybe you need to pray to Zeus. And so you carry out rites. And again, this could include dancing and music and gifts and sacrifices and things like that. There are no temples at this point, but there are probably shrines, like we saw in the Mycenaean and Minoan worlds. There are probably places with like an altar or a place to do sacrifices or offer gifts that are sacred to that god or goddess. Right, so instead of temples, you get these shrines. I will also note that these kinds of rites are carried out on a village level. They're also carried out on the oikos level. So if you are just a household and you have specific requests for a god or goddess, right? Maybe someone in the family just got married and you want it to be a happy marriage or a fruitful marriage with lots of kids, or maybe someone's sick and you want them to get better. You, as just an oikos, can pray to the gods and offer them worship and ask for things. And in that case, it's carried out by the head of the household, who would be that oldest male member of the household. He would lead the rites and the sacrifices, and probably you would just do it at a spot in the oikos. Maybe you set up a little altar or something, and you can have your rites there. So yeah, this is kind of the basics of religion in the early Iron Age, and as I mentioned before, it doesn't change much in the ancient Greek world, right? They generally have the same set of gods. Some new ones will get added. We'll talk about that. They generally have the same idea of the gods, of a charis relationship and of the need for worship. Villages and cities have priests and priestesses who carry out specific rites to help the people of that village, and families also can carry out their own rites on a kind of more individual level. So that's just the basics, the overview of ancient Greek religion as we see it in the Homeric poems and later. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.